I have read so many books that fall into the kind of wellness or well-being category. Some of them have been fantastic, some of them not so great. So I have 5 books here that I've actually managed to take the learnings from and implement into my life. And they're ones that also go a little bit under the radar as well. So I'm going to explain why I like them and why maybe you might like them as well. So grab a cuppa, your drink of choice, let me know what you've got in the comments, and let's talk about wellness books. Before we get into this, I just want to say that I think sometimes there can be a trap when it comes to these self-development books. It's almost like if you read it, there's the promise of a completely new life. And I used to read self-development books in this way, as in, I expect this book to change my life. I'm going to pay £10, whatever it is for this book, and I would like to be a new person at the end of it. And I realised that it's all about how you take action from the books. And actually, I was avoiding a lot of my kind of healing, self-development, spirituality journey by just being laser focused on these books and not actually thinking about what it means to me, how I apply it to my life. I tell you something, at the time it was a fantastic distraction from actually doing the work, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. And I feel like when I've looked at these books in a completely different way and tried to apply it, I've got a lot more from them. So the first book, and I guess an author in particular that I absolutely love within the wellness, wellbeing, spirituality space, is Tara Brach. And this is her book, Trust in the Gold. I've got another one down there, which is Radical Acceptance, and I think she's got one called Radical Compassion as well. And she is a meditation teacher. As the title would suggest, Trust in the Gold is all about coming back to who we are innately and knowing that the goodness is already there, and you can kind of discover that through meditation practices or self-inquiry. And honestly, when I read these books, they just felt like a warm hug. It felt like, if anyone's been to therapy who's watching this, that kind of feeling you get after you've had a really good therapy session, because it's such a perfect mix of self-development, spirituality, whilst also remembering compassion. And this has really formed a lot of my teachings. I'm a yoga teacher, and a lot of what I think about in terms of wellness really comes with this edge of compassion, thanks to Tara Brach and how she kind of explains everything. This book in particular is really easy to digest. There's lots of really nice illustrations throughout it as well. But I felt myself feeling, as I was reading this, like I've needed to hear these words for a really long time. It's a much softer approach to wellness compared to some of the other books that I've read. It almost just feels like throughout this, Tara is one of your best friends, guiding you through some practices, sharing her own wisdom and stories as to how you can just feel more aligned, more centered, and come back to who you really are. Honestly, I need to read more from Tara Brach. I love doing her meditation. She offers free meditations on her website. And yeah, I just love this book, and it will always have a really special place in my heart for kind of how it made me feel. I'd say if you want to be a bit more mindful, more present in your life, you want to cultivate more self-love, this book is the one, and Tara's your gal. Not sure if it goes without saying, but I will leave a link to all of these books that I mentioned in the description box. So this next book is linked to nutrition, and I don't tend to speak about food nutrition online because it's such a vast thing. It's so individual to different people, and I know that it can be a bit divisive, and I just think I don't actually know where I'm at with it yet, so why am I going to share things on that? But over the past year, I've really started to understand and learn more about gut health and links between that and mental health and well-being and hormones, and just how important it is. Like, I don't think we're not taught how important that is. This book by Tim Spector, his work in general, I just find really interesting. And what I love about this book is that it really dispels a lot of the myths that we're told around food. I'm a massive data person, and I feel like with everything, I just want to get to the facts. And this book does that really well because it brings a lot of the research to the forefront and basically critiques it. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that, but I've turned over a lot of corners in this book to come back to it. But a lot of the time with these studies that we're seeing that back up data that we're even told, I mean, I'm not going to get into that side of it, but you know, a lot of the data and information that we think is correct isn't, because the studies that have actually produced that data are either biased or they've been funded by someone that would want a particular outcome. So it's just really interesting, and I'm trying to get everyone to read this. I'm trying to get my husband to read this in a minute because I'm like, we need to know this stuff. Okay, next up we have Wintering, which this is, I think, the newest that I've read out of all of these. Yeah, it is. So I discovered this in October, so just as we were coming into autumn, and honestly, I really would say this book has been life-changing for me in terms of my perspective. And off the back of this book, I've done a lot more research around kind of seasonal living and how at the minute, obviously, it's the new year. Well, when I'm currently filming this, it's the new year, and there's definitely this perception of kind of new year, new me. You have to go into the new year with full steam, and this for me has really helped me flip that and reconsider what is actually going to be most valuable to me and my well-being at this time of year. And I feel like I discovered this at the time in my life that was right for me. I'm much more open about kind of alternative ways of living. I'm experimenting with what kind of life works for me, and it's very different to one that I used to live. I hope that that's focused so you can see just how many corners I have turned over again of this one, which is always the sign of me that it's a book that I'm like, oh my god, like just completely compelled by what the person is saying. And on the front you might have been able to see that it says the power of rest and retreat in difficult times. And with this book, what it basically does is takes you through the seasons of winter and autumn as well. And it basically talks about the power of the darkness before we get the light. So obviously there's no kind of light without dark, it's just the way it is. And this just really beautifully kind of portrays how important it is during the winter months to have that time to retreat and rest, because otherwise we're going to get to spring and we're going to be exhausted. And I've definitely been, before kind of becoming a yoga teacher and really thinking about how I wanted to live my life, I was very caught up in doing. It was like a constant thing of do, regardless of the seasons, regardless of nature. And it's not just this book, but this kind of book really cemented a lot of the kind of things that I'd been thinking and feeling around winter being a time to retreat. I mean, it's quite hard to explain because there's lots of different things in this book, but it really does display that really well, and the power of doing that. I think that I did this a little bit last year, but I'm definitely doing it more so this year. And I cannot tell you how much more at peace and more at ease I feel going into this new year, knowing that I'm not going to push myself to just go all in and kind of be like go. Like that doesn't feel right to me up until about kind of March, April. So I'm gonna live with the seasons. I'm gonna still rest, I'm gonna still retreat, and actually I just feel so much better for it already. I think everyone would get value from this book, but particularly if you are really interested in like our connection to nature, how you can live more seasonally and things like that, and you haven't read this book, I feel like you already would have read this book if you're kind of interested in that, but if you haven't, 10 out of 10. It's 10 out of 10. This next book is, again, one that has really made me think about how I live my life, and it is Lunar Living by Kirsty Gallagher. And this basically shares a lot of rituals that you can do around the full moon and the new moon. I'm not too kind of invested in the astrology side of this from my own perspective, but I really appreciate using the moon cycles to just check in with myself, release anything that isn't serving me, and think about how I want to move forward. It includes things like affirmations, journal prompts, different rituals that you can do for different new moons and full moons, and it's just really making me think about the power of ritual instead of routine. That's one of the biggest things I've taken from this, and actually the power of reflection and looking forward at certain points in the month. So actually having a bit of a schedule with that, and because it's only twice a month, I find it very manageable, and I find that I actually stick to it as well. And I've just seen some, like, it's just really nice to look back at the journal entries that I write on these days and kind of know that I could come to this book and know exactly what I want to do on that given night because I've got the ritual in there. So if you're interested in the moon cycles, or even if you just want to integrate like a little bit more of a ritual into your like self-reflection and journaling, I think this is a really nice place to start. And lastly, a book for anyone who has a period, because we are not taught about this stuff enough. I honestly, when I read this book, I was like, how have I got to the age of 27 and not know anything really about like the power of hormones, different cycles, the fact that we should really be thinking about living through the month rather than daily. I got so much from this book. It's Period Power by Maisie Hill. One thing I would say with this is that it's quite a heavy read. Like, I was getting into bed and reading this in the evening and I was like, no, this is one to have in the afternoon with a cup of tea, just sit down and try to like cherry pick the bits of information that are valuable to you. It basically speaks about the cycles and how typically this is split into 4 sections of a month if your cycle is a month. It might not be. It discusses all of that in here. And obviously there's lots of kind of medical terms for that, like the menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulation, but it also references it in a different way, and it basically speaks about the fact that every single month we have a spring, a summer, an autumn and a winter. This has really made me think about, again, hormones, which is really important, but also how I can schedule my kind of social life, things that I can eat, lots of different things in my life that I do currently that can help to support me just feeling calmer. It's basically a manual of how to align your daily life with your menstrual cycle. And when you start to do this, it does make a really big difference. Like, I used to just not think about it at all, and then I'd plan in like seeing my friends or like a big social occasion on the day or even the day after my period has come. And it's like, why would you do that? This is basically a manual on how to align your daily life with your menstrual cycle, which is actually really important. Like, since reading this, it's made me realize how much of an impact that can have just on like your overall stress levels, your hormones, which control so many different aspects of your life, even little things down to bloating, how well you sleep. Like, it's all very interlinked, and there is so much that we can do to just make our lives easier for ourselves, and this book really sort of summarizes that really nicely. And there's a lot of information, as I said, but a really good one to have and just always keep referring back to. So they're my 5 picks. Let me know if you've read any of them or have any book recommendations that are similar to those. I would absolutely love to know. I upload weekly content, so subscribe so you can keep up to date with that, and I will see you in the next video.